I discovered the destruction on a bitter February morning in Rochester, Minnesota, when I stepped outside with my coffee and found 3 years of careful landscaping buried under a mountain of frozen, salt-crusted snow. My name is Wesley Lancaster, and I had spent the better part of 3 years transforming my front garden beds into something resembling an actual sanctuary. I am not a particularly green-thumbed person by nature, but after my divorce finalized and I bought this modest ranch house in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision, I needed a project, something to pour my energy into that would not involve lawyers or painful memories. The garden became that project. I researched native Minnesota plants, spent weekends at nurseries, learned about soil composition and drainage. I planted purple coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, little bluestem grass, and serviceberry shrubs. I installed decorative river rock borders and mulched everything properly. It looked good. Really good. Neighbors would stop during their evening walks to compliment the transformation. Then came the snowstorm. Rochester gets hammered pretty regularly during winter, but this particular storm dumped 14 inches in less than 24 hours. The city plows came through, the neighborhood settled under a white blanket, and I spent the morning clearing my driveway like everyone else. By noon, my back ached, but my driveway was clear, my sidewalk was shoveled, and I felt accomplished. That sense of accomplishment evaporated the next morning when I saw what had happened overnight. Someone had pushed an enormous pile of snow directly onto my garden beds. Not just a little overflow from clearing a driveway. This was deliberate. A massive mound of snow, at least 4 feet high, covered the entire front landscaping area. Worse, the snow was mixed with chunks of ice, gravel, and what looked like an excessive amount of road salt. The decorative rocks I had carefully placed were scattered. The wooden garden bed borders I had installed were cracked and pushed askew. I stood there in my bathrobe and boots, coffee growing cold in my hand, staring at the disaster. My breath formed clouds in the frigid air as I tried to process what I was seeing. This was not an accident. You do not accidentally create a snow pile this large and this specifically placed. Admiring the improvement, Wesley. I turned to find Brenda Morrison standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, wearing a puffy purple jacket that made her look like a hostile grape. Brenda was the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates, a position she had held for 6 years and wielded like a scepter. She was in her mid-50s, had the kind of severely angled haircut that soccer moms used to request in 2015, and possessed an expression of permanent dissatisfaction. I had only lived in the neighborhood for 3 years, but I had already learned that Brenda Morrison considered herself the supreme authority on everything from acceptable mailbox designs to proper lawn mowing patterns. "Did you do this?" I asked, gesturing at the snow mountain covering my garden. "I had the snow from the HOA common areas relocated," she said, her voice crisp and matter-of-fact. "Your garden beds were in violation of community standards anyway. Consider this a correction." I blinked. "A correction? Brenda, you just destroyed 3 years of landscaping. Your plantings exceeded the approved height restrictions outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA covenants," she recited, as if reading from a script. "Native grasses and flowering perennials are also not on the approved plant list. The HOA board sent you a notice 3 weeks ago." "I never received any notice," I said, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. "And those plants are native species. They are good for the environment. They require less water, they support pollinators, they are not approved," Brenda interrupted. "The approved list includes juniper, hostas, and petunias. Your garden was an eyesore and a violation. Now the problem is solved. You are welcome." She turned to walk away. "Brenda, wait," I called after her. "You cannot just destroy someone's property because you think it violates some rule I never even knew about." She looked back over her shoulder. "I can, and I did. Read your covenants, Wesley. You agreed to them when you purchased your home. If you have a complaint, you can submit it in writing to the HOA board. We meet the third Tuesday of every month." Then she walked away, her boots crunching in the snow. I stood there, fury building in my chest like a bonfire. The coffee in my hand had gone ice cold. I looked back at the destroyed garden beds, at 3 years of work buried under contaminated snow, and I made a decision. If Brenda Morrison wanted to play by the rules, then we would play by the rules. All of them. I went inside, cranked up the heat, and started doing research. The first thing I did was dig out my closing documents from when I bought the house. Sure enough, buried in the stack of papers I had signed, there was a copy of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I had skimmed them at the time, mostly noting things about not painting my house neon green or parking RVs in the driveway. I had not paid much attention to the landscaping section. I read it now, carefully. Section 12 dealt with landscaping and exterior modifications. Paragraph 4 stated that all plantings in front yards must not exceed 36 inches in height and must be selected from the approved plant list found in Appendix C. I flipped to Appendix C. The list was absurdly limited. Juniper shrubs, hostas, petunias, marigolds, impatiens, and ornamental grass not exceeding 12 inches. That was it. No native species, no pollinator-friendly wildflowers, nothing that might actually benefit the local ecosystem. But here is what interested me more. Section 18, which dealt with HOA board responsibilities and limitations. Paragraph 2 specifically stated that the HOA board must provide written notice of any violation, delivered either by certified mail or hand, delivered with signature confirmation. The homeowner then had 30 days to remedy the violation before any enforcement action could be taken. Enforcement actions were limited to fines, not property destruction. I read that paragraph 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. Then I searched my email, my regular mail, everything. No notice from the HOA. Nothing. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 2 doors down. Marcus was a retired insurance adjuster who had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for over a decade. If anyone would know how the HOA actually operated versus how it was supposed to operate, it would be him. "Wesley, hey," Marcus answered. "Saw the snow pile on your garden this morning. That was Brenda, was it not? How did you know?" "Because she did the same thing to the Hendersons 4 years ago," Marcus said with a sigh. "They had planted roses that she said were not on the approved list. She had snow dumped on them. Then she fined them for having damaged landscaping." My grip tightened on the phone. "She fined them after she destroyed their plants." "Yep. The Hendersons fought it for a while, but eventually they just paid the fines and replanted with her approved list. It was not worth the headache, they said." "Did they ever receive a violation notice before she destroyed their roses?" "Not that I know of," Marcus said. "Brenda kind of does what she wants. Most people just go along with it because fighting the HOA is expensive and exhausting." "Well, I am not most people," I said. Marcus chuckled. "Good luck, man. You are going to need it." After hanging up with Marcus, I took detailed photographs of the snow pile, the damaged garden bed borders, the scattered rocks, everything. I measured the height of the snow mound. I documented the salt and debris mixed into it. Then I went to my computer and started drafting an email to the HOA board. I kept it professional but firm. I outlined the damage that had been done. noted that I had never received any violation notice as required by the HOA covenants, and requested immediate compensation for the destroyed landscaping and repairs to the damaged garden structures. I cited the specific sections of the covenants that Brenda had violated. I attached the photographs. Then I sent it to the HOA board email address listed on the Meadowbrook Estates website. The response came 2 hours later. "Mr. Lancaster, your concerns have been noted." However, upon review, the HOA board finds that the actions taken were appropriate enforcement of community standards. No compensation will be provided. Additionally, you are hereby notified that you have 30 days to replace your non-compliant landscaping with approved plants and repair the damaged garden borders to HOA standards. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50. Sincerely, Brenda Morrison, HOA President. I read the email twice, my jaw clenching tighter with each word. She was doubling down. Not only was she refusing to take responsibility for the destruction, but she was now threatening to fine me for not fixing what she had destroyed. I forwarded the email to my friend Daniel, who was a real estate attorney in Minneapolis. We had gone to college together and stayed close over the years. If anyone could tell me whether I had a legal leg to stand on, it would be him. Daniel called me back within an hour. "Wesley, this is insane," he said without preamble. "She cannot destroy your property and then fine you for it. That is not how any of this works. So I can fight this. You can absolutely fight this. In fact, I think you should. What she did is not just a violation of your HOA covenants, it is probably property destruction, which is a crime. You could file a police report." That thought had not even occurred to me. "Really?" "Yeah, really. She intentionally damaged your property. Doesn't matter if she is the HOA president. She does not have the right to destroy your landscaping without following proper procedures. And based on what you sent me, she did not follow any procedures. What should I do? Document everything. Keep all emails. Take more photos as the snow melts and you can assess the full damage. Get estimates from landscaping companies for the cost of replacement. Then file a police report and send a formal demand letter to the HOA for compensation. If they refuse, you can sue them in small claims court or district court, depending on the amount of damages. How much are we talking? For 3 years of landscaping. Could easily be several $1,000s, maybe more depending on the plants and materials. Get professional estimates. Do not lowball it. Document every single expense. I thanked Daniel and hung up, feeling a sense of purpose crystallizing. Brenda Morrison thought she could bully me into compliance. She was wrong. Over the next few days, as the temperatures slowly climbed and the snow began to melt, the full extent of the damage became apparent. The salt had killed everything. The perennials that might have survived a normal winter were brown and withered. The serviceberry shrubs looked dead, their branches brittle and discolored. The soil itself seemed contaminated, with a white salt crust visible on the surface. The wooden garden borders were not just cracked but broken in several places, clearly from the weight of the snow or from equipment used to push it there. I called 3 different landscaping companies to get estimates. The first 2 came out, assessed the damage, and gave me quotes. The third company, a small local business called Green Horizons Landscaping, sent out their owner, a guy named Tom Brennan. Tom was in his 40s, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. He walked around my front yard, examined the dead plants, tested the soil, and let out a low whistle. "This is bad," he said. "The salt contamination alone is going to require soil remediation. You cannot just plant new stuff in this. It will die too." "What does soil remediation involve?" We would have to remove the top 12 to 18 inches of soil and replace it with clean topsoil. Then, we would have to replant everything and rebuild your borders. Looking at what you had here before and the work required to fix it, you are looking at somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. I felt my stomach drop. 10,000, maybe more, Tom said apologetically. I can give you a detailed written estimate, but yeah, this is serious damage. Whoever did this really did a number on your yard. I told him about Brenda and the HOA. Tom just shook his head. I have heard stories about that woman, he said. She is on some kind of power trip. You are not the first person in this neighborhood she has messed with. Can you put all this in a detailed written estimate? I need it for legal purposes. Absolutely. I will have it to you by tomorrow. True to his word, Tom emailed me a comprehensive estimate the next day. It broke down every aspect of the work: soil removal and disposal, new topsoil, replacement plants, new garden borders, labor costs, everything. The total came to $9,700. Armed with 3 estimates, all of them in the $8,000 to $10,000 range, I went to the Rochester Police Department and filed a report for property destruction. The officer who took my statement, a middle-aged woman named Officer Patricia Hayes, listened patiently as I explained the situation. "So your HOA president dumped snow on your garden and destroyed it?" she asked, taking notes. "Yes. Without any prior notice, which violates our HOA covenants and causing nearly $10,000 in damage." Officer Hayes looked up from her notepad. 10,000. I have the estimates from 3 landscaping companies. She reviewed the estimates I had brought, along with the before and after photos. She took down Brenda's information and told me she would follow up with her. "I have to be honest with you, Mr. Lancaster," Officer Hayes said as she filed the report. "HOA disputes are tricky. A lot of times they end up being civil matters rather than criminal, but property destruction of this magnitude, that is worth investigating. I will talk to her and see what she says." "Thank you," I said. "I just want this documented." "It is documented," she assured me. "You will get a copy of the report for your records." 2 days later, I received a furious phone call from Brenda Morrison. "How dare you file a police report against me?" she shrieked into the phone. "I am the HOA president. I was enforcing community standards." "You destroyed my property without following the procedures outlined in our own covenants," I said calmly. "That is not enforcement, that is vandalism." "It is not vandalism. You were in violation." "I never received a notice." "You are required to provide written notice and allow 30 days for compliance. You did neither." "I sent a notice." "No, you did not. And I have the covenants right here that say enforcement actions are limited to fines, not property destruction. You exceeded your authority, Brenda." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from fury to icy calculation. "You are making a big mistake, Wesley. The HOA has lawyers. We will bury you in legal fees if you pursue this." "Then I guess we will see each other in court," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. I had never been a confrontational person. The divorce had been amicable. My job as a software developer at a medical tech company was low drama, and I generally avoided conflict when possible. But something about Brenda's entitled attitude, her assumption that she could just destroy what I had built and face no consequences, lit a fire in me that I did not even know existed. I called Daniel again and told him about the police report and Brenda's threatening phone call. "Good," Daniel said. "Let her threaten. It will look great in court when she has to explain why she intimidated you after you filed a legitimate police report. Now, next step. You need to send a formal demand letter." "For what amount?" Based on those estimates, I would demand $12,000. That covers the highest estimate, plus a little extra for your trouble and the hassle of dealing with this. Send it certified mail to the HOA board and to Brenda personally. Give them 15 days to respond. And if they do not pay, then we file a lawsuit. Probably in district court given the amount. It will take time, but based on what you have told me and the documentation you have, I think you have a very strong case. Daniel helped me draft the demand letter. It was professional and detailed, outlining the damage, citing the covenant violations, referencing the police report, and demanding $12,000 in compensation within 15 days. I sent it certified mail to both the HOA's registered address and to Brenda's home address. The waiting began. During those 15 days, life in Meadowbrook Estates became noticeably uncomfortable. Brenda apparently spread the word that I was suing the HOA, which was not quite accurate yet, but close enough. Some neighbors avoided eye contact when they saw me. Others stopped by to quietly express support. Marcus came over one evening with a 6-pack of beer. "Heard you are going to war with Brenda," he said, handing me a bottle as we sat on my front porch despite the cold. Something like that. "Good. Someone needs to stand up to her. She has been running this neighborhood like her personal fiefdom for too long. Have you ever thought about running against her for HOA president?" Marcus snorted. "And deal with that headache? No thanks, but I will vote for anyone who runs against her." Another neighbor, a younger woman named Jennifer who lived across the street, stopped by the next day. "I just wanted to say I think what you are doing is brave," she said. "Brenda sent me a violation notice last year because my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Not the wrong color, the wrong shade. I had to repaint it 3 times before she approved it." "That is insane," I said. "That is Brenda," Jennifer replied. "I hope you win." The 15 days passed. No response from the HOA. No call, no email, no certified letter in return. Nothing. "They are ignoring you," Daniel said when I called him. "Classic intimidation tactic. They think if they stonewall you, you will give up." "I am not giving up." "Good. Then we file the lawsuit. I can handle it for you, or I can refer you to someone local in Rochester. Your call." "How much will it cost?" "If we keep it straightforward, probably a few thousand in legal fees. But if you win, you can request that the court award you attorney's fees, especially since the HOA is clearly in the wrong here. So you might get those back. Let's do it." Daniel filed the lawsuit in Olmsted County District Court the following week. The complaint was straightforward: breach of contract, property damage, and negligence. We sued the Meadowbrook Estates HOA as an entity and named Brenda Morrison individually as a defendant. We requested $12,000 in damages plus attorney's fees and costs. The HOA and Brenda were served with the lawsuit 10 days later. The reaction was immediate and explosive. I received an email from the HOA's attorney, a firm out of Minneapolis, requesting to discuss settlement. I forwarded it to Daniel, who responded that we were open to settlement discussions, but would not accept anything less than full compensation for the damages plus our attorney's fees. Then I received a hand-delivered letter from the HOA board, not just Brenda but all 5 members, stating that they had called a special meeting to discuss my lawsuit and my continued violations of community standards. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. in the community center. "Do I have to go?" I asked Daniel. "No, but it might be interesting to see what they say. Just Don not agree to anything or sign anything without me reviewing it first." I decided to go. I wanted to look Brenda in the eye and let her know I was not backing down. The Meadowbrook Estates Community Center was a small building near the neighborhood playground. mostly used for HOA meetings and the occasional birthday party rental. When I arrived on Tuesday evening, the parking lot was surprisingly full. Apparently, word had spread that this was going to be an interesting meeting. Inside, about 30 residents were seated in folding chairs facing a table where the 5 HOA board members sat. Brenda was in the center, flanked by the vice president, secretary, treasurer, and a member-at-large whose names I barely remembered. They all looked uncomfortable except Brenda, who looked furious. I took a seat in the back. Marcus was there, along with Jennifer and several other neighbors I recognized. Brenda called the meeting to order and launched into a prepared speech. "We are here tonight to address a serious issue affecting our community," she began, her voice tight and controlled. "One of our residents has decided to sue the HOA rather than comply with our community standards. This lawsuit is frivolous and costly, and it affects all of us because HOA legal expenses come from our dues." There were murmurs in the crowd. "The resident in question," Brenda continued, glancing at me with barely concealed contempt, "was in clear violation of our landscaping rules. He was provided with notice, which he claims he never received, although we have records of sending it." "Show us the records," I called out. Brenda's face reddened. "Excuse me, you will have your turn to speak." "No, I want to see the records now. You claim you sent me a notice. Show everyone here the proof." The room went silent. All eyes turned to Brenda. "We do not need to provide that at this meeting," she said stiffly. "Because you do not have it," I said, standing up. "You never sent me a notice. You just decided you did not like my garden and destroyed it, and now you are lying about it." "How dare you?" Brenda hissed. "Show the records, Brenda," Marcus called out. Several other people murmured in agreement. Brenda looked at the other board members, who all suddenly seemed very interested in the papers in front of them. No one met her eyes. "This is not the forum for this discussion," Brenda said finally. "The lawsuit will be handled through proper legal channels." "Then, why did you call this meeting?" Jennifer asked. "If you just wanted to talk about the lawsuit, you could have done that in executive session. You called a community meeting to make Wesley look bad." More murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Brenda tried to regain control of the meeting, moving on to other business, but the damage was done. People kept interrupting with questions about the lawsuit, about HOA procedures, about Brenda's authority to destroy property. The meeting devolved into chaos and was finally adjourned early. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to me. "That took guts," one older gentleman said, shaking my hand. "She has needed someone to stand up to her for years," another woman added. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You just made an enemy for life, you know that, right?" "I think I already had," I replied. Over the next several weeks, the lawsuit moved forward. The HOA's attorney filed a response denying all allegations and claiming that I had been properly noticed and that the actions taken were within the HOA's enforcement powers. We entered the discovery phase, which meant both sides had to turn over documents. This was where things got interesting. Daniel subpoenaed all HOA records related to my property, including any violation notices, meeting minutes, and correspondence. What came back was revealing. There was no certified mail receipt showing a violation notice had been sent to me. There was no signed delivery confirmation. There was not even a copy of the alleged notice itself in the HOA's files. What there was, however, was an email chain between Brenda and the HOA's landscaping contractor, a company called Northland Property Services, where Brenda explicitly instructed them to remove the non-compliant landscaping at 847 Maple Grove Drive and to pile the snow from the common areas on the site to kill the plants. Daniel called me as soon as he read it. Wesley, she wrote it down. She literally wrote in an email that she wanted the snow piled there to kill your plants. This is not just negligence, this is intentional destruction of property. So what does that mean? It means we have her dead to rights. This email is going to make settlement negotiations very different. I am going to send this to their attorney right now and see what they say. The response came within 24 hours. The HOA's attorney requested an in-person settlement conference. We met at Daniel's office in Minneapolis 2 weeks later. The HOA was represented by their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s named Catherine Mills, and by 2 board members, the treasurer and the member at large. Brenda was notably absent. My clients would like to resolve this matter without further litigation, Catherine began once we were all seated in Daniel's conference room. We are listening, Daniel said. The HOA is prepared to offer $8,000 to settle all claims and dismiss the lawsuit. That does not cover the full cost of repair, and it does not include attorney's fees, Daniel countered. It is a fair offer considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that your client, through its president, intentionally destroyed my client's property. Daniel slid a printed copy of Brenda's email across the table. This is not a negligence case. This is intentional destruction. My client is entitled to full damages, attorney's fees, and punitive damages. Catherine read the email, and I saw her jaw tighten. She excused herself and stepped out of the conference room with the 2 board members. They were gone for 15 minutes. When they returned, Catherine's expression was carefully neutral. The HOA is prepared to offer full restitution of $12,000, plus reasonable attorney's fees up to $5,000, in exchange for dismissal of the lawsuit and a mutual non-disparagement agreement. No non-disparagement agreement, I said before Daniel could respond. I am not going to be silenced about what happened. Catherine looked at the board members who both nodded reluctantly. Fine. $12,000 in damages, $5,000 in attorney's fees, no non-disparagement clause, but we want a full release of all claims. Daniel looked at me. I thought about it for a moment. $17,000 would cover the landscaping repair, Daniel's fees, and leave me with a little extra. More importantly, it was a clear admission that the HOA knew they were in the wrong. I want one more thing, I said. Brenda Morrison resigns as HOA president. The room went silent. That is not something we can negotiate, Catherine said carefully. The board members are elected by the homeowners. Then call it a strong recommendation, I said. Because if she stays in power, she will just do this to someone else. The HOA is admitting she acted improperly by agreeing to this settlement. She should not remain in a position of authority. The treasurer, a quiet man named Robert Chen, spoke up for the first time. I will make that recommendation to the board, he said. Personally, I think it is the right call. This whole situation has been a disaster. We agreed to the settlement terms. The lawsuit would be dismissed with prejudice, meaning it could not be refiled. The HOA would pay $12,000 to me directly for the landscaping repairs, and $5,000 to Daniel for attorney's fees. In exchange, I would sign a release of all claims related to the incident. No non-disparagement agreement, which meant I was free to tell anyone who asked exactly what had happened. The settlement agreement was drafted, signed, and filed with the court within a week. The checks arrived by courier 2 days after that. I immediately hired Green Horizons Landscaping to begin the restoration work. Tom Brennan and his crew showed up on a surprisingly warm day in late March. The snow had finally melted completely, revealing the full extent of the devastation. Dead plants, salt-crusted soil, broken borders. It looked even worse than I remembered. "We are going to make this right," Tom promised. "Better than it was before." They worked for 3 full days. First, they removed all the dead plant material and the contaminated soil, hauling it away in a truck. Then they installed new, higher-quality wooden borders made from cedar that would last longer than the original pine. They brought in rich, dark topsoil and amended it with compost. Finally, they began planting. I had worked with Tom to design a new garden plan. We stuck with native species because I still believed in supporting pollinators and using plants suited to Minnesota's climate. But we made sure everything complied with the HOA's ridiculous height restrictions. Low-growing varieties of coneflower, black-eyed Susans, native sedges instead of taller grasses. We added some early blooming bulbs for spring color, daffodils and crocuses. The serviceberry shrubs were replaced with dwarf varieties that would not exceed the height limit. By the time Tom and his crew finished, my front yard looked incredible. Different from before, but honestly better. The new design had more structure and year-round interest. Tom even threw in some decorative mulch and solar path lights at no extra charge. "You were a good client," he said with a grin, "and I like seeing someone stand up to bullies." The neighborhood noticed immediately. People stopped during their walks to admire the new landscaping. Jennifer came over with a bottle of wine to celebrate. Marcus brought his wife by for a tour. "This looks amazing," Marcus said, "and Brenda must be losing her mind." "Have you seen her lately?" I asked. "She has been laying low." "There is a petition going around to call a special election for HOA president. I signed it. That was news to me." "Really?" "Yeah, people are fed up." "Your lawsuit opened a lot of eyes. Turns out Brenda has been pulling similar stunts for years, just nothing as big as what she did to you. People are done with her." The special election was scheduled for mid-April. Brenda was running to keep her position, but 2 other residents had declared their candidacy as well. One was a retired teacher named Susan Palmer, who had lived in Meadowbrook Estates since it was built. The other was a younger guy, a healthcare administrator named Michael Torres. Both Susan and Michael ran on platforms of reforming the HOA, updating the outdated covenants and making the board more transparent and accountable. It was clear which way the wind was blowing. I did not attend the candidate forum, but Jennifer filled me in afterward. "Brenda completely melted down," Jennifer said, laughing. "Someone asked her about your lawsuit, and she went on this rant about ungrateful homeowners and maintaining standards. Then Susan asked her to show proof that she had followed proper procedures, and Brenda just kept saying it was handled appropriately. She looked unhinged. The election was held on a Tuesday evening in April. I did show up to vote, casting my ballot for Susan Palmer. When the results were announced later that evening, it was not even close. Susan won with 63% of the vote. Michael came in second with 28%. Brenda received 9%. She resigned from the board entirely the next day. I will not lie, it felt good. Not just because Brenda was gone, but because the neighborhood had collectively decided that her behavior was unacceptable. Change was possible, even in an HOA. Susan Palmer turned out to be an excellent HOA president. One of her first actions was to form a committee to review and update the covenants. I was asked to serve on that committee, along with 5 other homeowners representing different interests and perspectives. Over the course of several months, we modernized the rules. We expanded the approved plant list to include native species and pollinator-friendly options. We clarified the violation notice procedures and added safeguards against arbitrary enforcement. We limited the HOA board's authority to impose fines and made the appeals process more transparent. We even reduced the annual dues slightly, by cutting unnecessary expenses like the landscaping contractor that Brenda had been using, who turned out to be overcharging the HOA significantly. The updated covenants were presented to the neighborhood at a meeting in June and passed with overwhelming support. My garden thrived through that spring and summer. The coneflowers bloomed purple and pink, attracting butterflies and bees. The black-eyed Susans added bright yellow splashes of color. The serviceberry shrubs, though still small, produced delicate white flowers and later small berries that birds loved. It was everything I had hoped for and more. One evening in late August, I was outside watering the garden when a car pulled up to the curb. I did not recognize the vehicle, a silver sedan with out-of-state plates. A woman got out, middle-aged, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. "Are you Wesley Lancaster?" she asked. "I am." "Can I help you? My name is Patricia Simmons. I am Brenda Morrison's sister." I tensed, unsure what to expect. "I am not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, holding up her hands. "I just wanted to apologize for my sister, for what she did to you. I have been trying to get her to see a therapist for years, but she would not listen. She has always been controlling, but it got worse after her divorce. She fixated on being HOA president like it was the most important thing in the world, and she hurt people because of it." I did not know what to say. "She moved in with me in Iowa," Patricia continued, "sold her house here and left Minnesota. I think the embarrassment of losing the election and everything that happened with your lawsuit was too much. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that not everyone in her family thinks what she did was okay. You had every right to stand up for yourself." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate you coming by to say that." She nodded, got back in her car, and drove away. I stood there for a long time after she left, thinking about Brenda Morrison and how someone could become so obsessed with power and control that they would destroy other people's property over a garden. I felt a small pang of pity for her, but mostly, I just felt relieved that she was gone. The final piece of the story came in September. I received a notice that Officer Patricia Hayes, the police officer who had taken my initial report, had been following up on the case. Since I had settled the civil lawsuit, I assumed the criminal investigation had been dropped. Apparently, I was wrong. Officer Hayes called me one afternoon. "Mr. Lancaster, I wanted to let you know that we concluded our investigation into the property destruction incident," she said. "We forwarded our findings to the Olmsted County Attorney's Office, and they decided to charge Miss Morrison with criminal property damage." "Really?" I was stunned. "It is a misdemeanor charge, and given that she has no prior criminal record and has already paid restitution, she will probably just get probation and maybe some community service." But the county attorney felt it was important to send a message that this kind of behavior is not acceptable, even in an HOA dispute. I had no idea that was still being pursued. The dollar amount of the damage was high enough that it warranted criminal charges independent of your civil case. "You will probably be contacted to testify if it goes to trial, but my guess is she will take a plea deal." Officer Hayes was right. 2 months later, I received notice that Brenda Morrison had pleaded guilty to misdemeanor property damage and been sentenced to 1 year of probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay a $500 fine to the county. It was a small consequence in the grand scheme of things, but it was something. A recognition that what she had done was not just a civil wrong but an actual crime. By the time winter rolled around again, my life in Meadowbrook Estates had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The garden was mulched and ready for the cold months ahead. The HOA was running smoothly under Susan Palmer's leadership. I had even started dating someone, a nurse I met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester. Her name was Emily, and she thought the whole HOA saga was hilarious. "You went to war with your HOA over a garden," she said one night as we sat on my couch, drinking wine and watching snow fall outside. "That is the most wholesome revenge story I have ever heard." "It was not really about revenge," I said. "It was about standing up for what was right." "Still, you won. That is pretty impressive." I looked out at the snow-covered yard, imagining the garden sleeping underneath, waiting for spring. In a few months it would bloom again. The coneflowers would return, the black-eyed Susans would stretch toward the sun, and the serviceberries would flower. It would be beautiful. Brenda Morrison had tried to destroy what I built, thinking she could bully me into submission. Instead, she lost everything: her position, her reputation, her home in the neighborhood, and ultimately faced criminal consequences for her actions. The HOA that had enabled her behavior was reformed, and the community was better for it. And my garden, it was not just restored. It was better than ever. Stronger, more thoughtfully designed, and grown from soil that was clean and nourishing rather than contaminated with salt and malice. I raised my wine glass toward the window, toward the sleeping garden and the falling snow. "To standing up for yourself," I said. Emily clinked her glass against mine. "To standing up for yourself." The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the neighborhood in white, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. I had learned something important through this whole ordeal: that communities work best when people are willing to challenge unfair authority, that covenants and rules are meaningless if they are not applied fairly and consistently, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be bullied. Spring came early that year. By mid-March, the snow had melted, and I was outside eagerly checking for signs of life in the garden beds. The first green shoots appeared in early April, the daffodils pushing through the soil, followed by the crocuses. By late April, the perennials were emerging, and by May, the garden was in full bloom. Susan Palmer stopped by one morning during her walk. "Your garden looks wonderful, Wesley," she said. "I think it might be the prettiest in the whole neighborhood. Thank you. It has been a labor of love." "You know, I have been thinking," Susan said. "The HOA used to have a garden tour every summer back before Brenda took over. She canceled it because she said people's yards were not up to standard. I would like to bring it back. Would you be willing to have your garden be part of it?" "I would love that." The garden tour was scheduled for June. 8 homeowners, including myself, volunteered to open their yards to the neighborhood. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and over 50 residents participated, walking from house to house, admiring the different gardens and landscaping styles. My garden was a hit. People loved the native plants and asked where they could buy similar ones. I handed out Tom Brennan's business card to at least a dozen people. Tom later told me he got 5 new clients from that garden tour alone. "You are my best advertisement," he joked. Marcus and his wife hosted a barbecue after the garden tour, and it felt like the whole neighborhood came together in a way it had not in years. People were laughing, kids were playing, and there was a sense of community that had been missing during Brenda's reign. "This is what it should always be like," Jennifer said, standing next to me as we watched the sun set over the neighborhood park. "Neighbors being neighbors, not subjects being ruled," agreed. As summer progressed, I found myself spending more and more time in the garden. Not out of obligation or stress, but because it genuinely brought me joy. I would sit on my front porch in the evenings, watching the butterflies and bees visit the flowers, listening to birds sing in the serviceberry shrubs, and feeling grateful for everything that had happened. It sounds strange to say I was grateful for Brenda Morrison pushing snow into my garden beds, but in a way I was. Not for the destruction itself, but for what came after. The experience had forced me to stand up for myself in a way I had not done before. It had taught me that fighting for what is right, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable, is worth it. It had brought the neighborhood together and led to meaningful change, and it had given me something beautiful. A garden that was not just plants and soil, but a symbol of resilience and renewal. Emily and I got more serious as the months went on. By fall, she was spending most weekends at my place, and we started talking about her moving in. She loved the house, loved the neighborhood, and especially loved the garden. "I have never dated someone with such a nice yard," she teased. "It is like living in a park." "Wait until you see it in spring," I said. "That is when it really comes alive." The HOA continued to improve under Susan Palmer's leadership. We started a neighborhood newsletter, organized more community events, and even began a project to create a pollinator garden in the common area near the playground. Several residents volunteered to help, and we spent a weekend in October planting native wildflowers and grasses. As I knelt in the dirt, helping to plant little bluestem and milkweed, I could not help but think about how different things were now compared to a year ago. A year ago, I had been fighting just to protect my own small garden from an HOA president on a power trip. Now, we were working together as a community to create something that would benefit everyone. Marcus was planting coneflowers nearby, and he caught my eye and grinned. "Bet you never thought you would be doing HOA-sponsored gardening, did you?" "Life is full of surprises," I replied. By the time the first snow fell in late November, the common area pollinator garden was established and ready for winter. In the spring, it would bloom, providing habitat for bees and butterflies and birds, and serving as a reminder of what communities can accomplish when they work together instead of tearing each other down. I still think about Brenda Morrison sometimes. I wonder if she ever reflected on what happened, if she ever realized that her need for control had cost her so much. I hope she found peace in Iowa with her sister. I hope she got the help she needed. But mostly, I just feel grateful that chapter is closed. Emily moved in officially in December, just before the holidays. We spent Christmas decorating the house together, hanging lights on the porch and placing a wreath on the door. The garden slept under its blanket of snow, and the neighborhood was quiet and peaceful. On New Year's Eve, we stood on the front porch with mugs of hot chocolate, watching fireworks in the distance. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked. "Just how much has changed in a year," I said. "Last January, I was dealing with the snow pile and the destroyed garden and Brenda Morrison. Now, here we are. Do you ever regret how much time and energy you put into fighting her?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, it was worth it, not just for me, but for the whole neighborhood. Sometimes you have to fight, even when it is hard." Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "I am proud of you." We watched the fireworks until they ended, then went inside to warmth and light and the promise of a new year. Outside, the garden rested beneath the snow, waiting patiently for spring. And I knew that when it bloomed again, it would be more beautiful than ever. The story of the HOA Karen who pushed snow into my garden beds and ended up paying for my entire landscape replacement became something of a legend in Meadowbrook Estates. New residents would hear about it and seek me out, wanting to know all the details. I became known as the guy who took on the HOA and won, which was not exactly how I saw myself, but I understood why it resonated with people. Everyone has felt powerless at some point, bullied by someone with authority, convinced that fighting back would only make things worse. My story gave people hope that standing up for yourself could actually work, that the system could be made to deliver justice, and that tyrants could be toppled. Susan Palmer served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down and endorsing Michael Torres as her successor. Michael won easily and continued the reforms Susan had started. The neighborhood thrived, property values increased, and Meadowbrook Estates became known as one of the friendliest, most well-managed communities in Rochester. As for me, I continued to tend my garden. Each spring brought new growth, new blooms, new life. The coneflowers got bigger and fuller. The serviceberries grew tall enough to provide shade for the smaller plants beneath them. Birds nested in the shrubs. Butterflies visited daily. It became exactly what I had envisioned when I first started 3 years earlier, a small sanctuary, a place of peace and beauty. And every time I looked at it, I remembered what it took to protect it. I remembered standing up to Brenda Morrison, filing the police report, pursuing the lawsuit, refusing to be intimidated or silenced. I remembered the neighbors who supported me, the attorney who believed in my case, the landscaper who restored what had been destroyed. I remembered that justice is not always easy, but it is always worth fighting for. Years later, when people ask me about that winter when the HOA Karen pushed snow into my garden beds, I tell them the whole story. I do not leave anything out, not the destruction, not the confrontation, not the lawsuit, not the settlement, not Brenda's ultimate downfall and criminal charges. I tell it all because it matters. It matters that people know they can fight back against Pet.